On day 4 of the days of the week of creation, Yahweh placed the sun and the moon and the stars in their positions, gave them names, called them each by name. There's 4 words which express maker and creator. It's Borah, which is the one who fills it up, takes an uncultivated place and plants a garden to his design. There's Zerah, which has to do with designing. There's Asha, which is the maker and producer. And there's Kana, which has to do with determining the full expanse, the extent from this side to that side of everything he chose to call his own possession. These 4 words in Hebrew, if you can look at these words and see what they mean, it's like, oh, he placed the stars in the sky. He designed every aspect of those images that we have now. I don't know that anybody in the face of the earth, perhaps, has ever seen them before. Those are images from the Hubble telescope. The nebulas, the galaxies, the planets. Yahweh designed each one of them and placed them. The scriptures tell us that he put the stars in the sky and placed them according to their moedim, or according to their seasons, is another way to say it. But the word moedim is the same word for season, which is also the appointed gatherings. The festivals are the appointed gatherings. It's the same concept that means the call or the summons or the invocation for those of military service to be at a certain space, at a certain time, right there. That's what the Moedim are. That's what the festivals are. And according to this Mishkan pattern, the letter that we're on today, the Samecx, lines up with the menorah in the Mishkan pattern, which is in the hidden or the set apart, otherwise known as the Kadosh place or the holy place. It's not visible to anyone but the priests. According to the call of their service, they were to go into the set-apart place. It was not for public view. The things out in the courtyard were seen by the public. You had to be qualified, decontaminated by the ashes of the red heifer to come into the big white fence. And the first thing you confronted, as we discussed last week, the Mishkan pattern, was the altar of sacrifice, the barbecue grate, as you will. And then the next thing was the laver, which is halfway between the altar of sacrifice and the Kadosh place, the set-apart, tented-over place. So as we discussed, the pattern is the big white fence, representing Pesach, or the first day, let there be light, like the big white curtain. And then you have the second day, separating water from water, the second day of creation. The second festival was separating leaven from unleavened. Then you have the third day, where he separated water from earth and where he spoke life, plant life, into the earth. You've got the third festival, Shavuot, where there's 49 days of counting, and then the 50th day where the one who was given life is birthed out of. Those were the spring feasts. Then there's the summertime, and now we have the Samecx, representing the first of the fall feasts, which is Yom Teruah, the day of blowing of trumpets. So here in this video of Beautiful Silence, there's a man named Jeff Oster, a friend of mine from down in California, who has just produced this. He plays the flugelhorn. We think of the day of blowing of trumpets as these loud trumpets, and so later on tonight we have a number of trumpets here which will play and have a blast of trumpets, of shofars, just for the sake of hearing them. But this lone flugelhorn, it's a whole different concept. But here we have this blend of this imagery between seeing and I hope appreciating the planets that Yahweh put in the sky on day 4. Each one in their position with this lone flugelhorn playing this beautiful, just virtually ethereal music behind. Just to give us this different sense. It's not always about yelling and shouting, but there's this, think who it is we are honoring. The guy who designed each one of those stars and placed them where they belong. The picture behind this day of placing the stars where they belong is a matter of jurisdiction and principalities. When you think of principalities, being raised as a Christian, my first thought was like, oh, those are like demon spirits. Each one have some kind of a jurisdiction, the demon of this and the evil spirit of that and so forth and so on. When Yahweh put the stars in the sky, He placed them in a certain way. Now, before the flood, there's this concept called the canopy theory. I heard about it when I was a kid. I don't know how many people of you heard about it, but there's this notion that the earth was a bit different before the flood. There's a place in Texas, creation research, who suggests that the earth was maybe 85% smaller than it is, and so the physics were a bit different. The chemical configuration in the air with the nitrogen and oxygen was different, which is why everything grew bigger, and that there was this sphere of ice. Perhaps it was solid ice, perhaps it was something else, I don't quite know. Maybe it was really thick, maybe it diffused the light of the stars, but maybe it magnified the light of the stars. But somehow or other, they didn't see necessarily the stars the way we see them. So even before the flood, if they had super intelligence, the way some people suggest, they may or may not have ever been able to see these stars. These pictures that we have just seen maybe have never been seen by any generation on the face of the earth until now. But to see the beautiful, incredible things that the one we regard has designed and made for His own pleasure. He determined the expanse. And when you think the expanse, it's not just in 3 dimensions, from over there to over there, linearly. People say, well, how big is the universe? Do you know what a Mobius strip is? Is anybody not familiar with a Mobius strip? If you take a ribbon, I don't have something to easily show you, say like a belt, right? A ribbon, say something with a certain width and length. You could say, well, there's the beginning and there's the end. And if you make a circle, you can say, well, there's the inside track and then there's the outside track. But if you put one twist in that strip and connect it back onto itself, what starts off on the inside goes to the outside as it goes around, and then it goes back to the inside, and it's a continuous loop covering all surfaces. And it looks like eternity, and it actually ends up being in the shape of a figure 8, which is one reason why the figure 8 is the shape of this eternity thing. But if the figure 8 was just by itself, it wouldn't work. It has to have this one twist, which makes it a Mobius strip. My point is, how big is the universe? He could have designed this place like a Mobius strip, where it's a very finite domain, but if we look in a certain direction, it looks like it goes on for eternity, because it, depending on how you're tracking in this strip. We don't know how big it is. He designed it to not know how big it is. But the interesting thing is, when Yahweh designed the universe, He not only designed it with the dimensions of longitude, latitude, and verticality, 3 dimensions, but every detail of the way everything works He designed. So He designed our psychology, He designed our consciousness, He designed our propensities to respond in this way and that way. So that when something, impacts it, we go, ouch, He designed that to work that way. It's all through neural synapses and links between the different types of nerve that go from your hand to your brain and then back for this reaction, but also emotions, and also intellectually. He designed all the software with such intricacy. The physical is nothing, hardly, compared to the detail of this immaterial that He designed. But He also then designed the fact that we want to do something or we don't want to do something, all these little things that are human nature, he designed that. And somehow then in this expanse of all that he chose to possess, which is what one of these words of create mean, he determined that the prize possession would be the willful, willing heart of a human to choose to regard his things. These things we're studying. Out of all the billions of galaxies, the incredible stars, the host of animal life, plant life, dinosaurs, insects, bacteria, flowers, the botany. I mean, the list could go on, and he chose out of all to have the highest regard, the highest valuable treasure is that somebody, like anybody watching this, has obviously put some decision to say, what is this? I'm going to take my time, I'm going to apply some energy, I'm going to put some attention towards these things that Yahweh has expressed about himself. I think, based on what his words mean and what he has made and what he showed us about all this, this is what brings him pleasure. This is what he has determined to be his greatest asset, the affections of mankind to seek his face via the aspect of seeking his ways as declared in his word. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, it's interesting that he didn't say, behold, Israel, Yahweh or Elohim, Yahweh is this or that. He said Shema, which means hear. It also means believe and do. But he did it by what we hear. He gave us his word. As a matter of fact, when you look in Exodus, where he talks about how he revealed himself on Mount Sinai, he said, take note, you saw no image, neither male nor female, no animal, no bird or fish or creature, you heard words. He could have designed anything. And he designed our psychology, our thoughts, everything you personally feel regarding the study of these words, like, oh, it's a little too hard, it's kind of weird, I don't know what to do with it, it feels awkward. He designed all that. He designed for all of us to feel that way. And he also designed within our being the capacity to choose to say, I'm going to look at him anyway. I'm going to put some effort towards it anyway. In spite of how difficult, how awkward, how weird, how the word might be discomfited, uncomfortable, I don't know where to place this. I don't know where this belongs. See, the letter Samecx has to do with an engineered structure. It has to do with placement. That's what principalities are. So when he put into the sky, when he placed the stars, he designed it such that at least now, who knows what it looked like from before the flood, but at least now we can look at the stars, and if you look close enough, well, you can kind of sort of design some constellations. Where did those come from? I've read a few things on the study of that. Nobody knows who came up with the constellations. It's completely unknown. As a matter of fact, I saw one thing where, I think it might have even been in an astronomy magazine. I brought one, just in case anybody wants to look at the pictures later on. It's a Beautiful Universe. Sky and Telescope puts it out, and just amazing photographs, similar to what we saw in the film there. But somebody did a little contest, and they said, here's the dots of the constellations we know. Come up with some other images. It's like, oh, okay, well, instead of Orion, it's the ice cream man, or, the tooth fairy, or whatever it might be, an elephant. It's like, yeah, it could have been anything. Have you ever stopped to think, why are the constellations what they are? Now, we might think, hey, that's astrology. I learned, hey, astrology, stay away from it. It's unchristian, it's heathen, it's pagan. It's like, is it? If Yahweh put the stars in the sky for us to connect lines between them and say, hey, that looks like a mouse, or that looks like a... is that wrong? Whose idea was it to connect the dots of the stars and come up with pictures anyway? Was it some heathen? Was it somebody into sorcery or witchcraft or some kind of occultic art? Does anybody maybe have an idea of where it came from? Because I looked at this one book at the bookstore a couple years ago, and this ancient regard of the astronomical connections, and they say nobody knows where this stuff came from. What we've inherited is that there are some Greek deities' names associated with the images, but even that was latecomers because the Greeks didn't prevail over the culture until about 300-400 BC with Alexander the Great. He's actually a Macedonian, but anyway, he kind of established the Greek Empire, 300 BC. So where did these things come from? Does anybody have an idea of the oldest record of the constellations? Or
all I know is that Yahweh told Abraham to set the stars, count the stars.
Okay. Is everybody familiar with that verse? Abraham was told by Yahweh to sephir the stars. And that word sephir means count. So part of what we're trying to do in this class is to show you how to use this red dictionary. The word sephir happens to be spelled Samecx Resh. Page 455. Of course, this is all written in modern Hebrew, and so what I've been doing, as you know, we don't have the whiteboard, we'll get it for the next half, is I look at these things in modern Hebrew, but then I transpose them over into Paleo, because I believe it affects a different part of your brain, and I see things differently. But then to talk about it and look back at the dictionary, you got to put it back in the modern, so it's a big deal. The letters are equivalent from the modern called the Chaldean flame letters, and the Paleo, the letter is the letter. There's really no difference. Other than the Paleo has no Sophite letters, and those are the final form of 5 special letters. But if you look at Samecx Resh, it's over here, starting down here on the bottom of the middle column. It says to count number, but it also says to recount or to tell or narrate. When you recount, it doesn't mean to count again. It's like count them again, double check. What it means is to tell a story. It also says to cut, as in he cut the hair. It's a letter, a document, or a book. So the Torah is actually called Sefer Torah. It doesn't mean the counting of the Torah, though it might, because gematria is putting the letter value. Jamie has talked about this quite a bit. The Aleph is the letter 1, Bet is letter 2, Gimel is letter 3. So Aleph equals 1, Bet equals 2, and Gimel equals 3. And if you had a word spelled Aleph, Bet, Gimel, it would equal 1 plus 2 plus 3, which equals 6. So the gematria value of Aleph, Bet, Gimel is 6. Pretty simple. Sefer Torah, you can count all the letters in the Torah. But it also means, if you come down, a barber or a hairdresser. It also means enumeration or census. It also means border or frontier. So part of the way that I've been doing these studies, which is the purpose of this class is to show you another way to regard how to read. You could sit there and say, well, the word sephir, the Samecx is the 15th letter. The Pei, so you have to know the alphabetic sequence in order to really make use of this. It goes Samecx, Ayin, Pei. So the Pei is 2 letters after the Samecx, and if Samecx number 15, Pei is 17, 15 plus 17 equals 32, right? And then a Resh, well, that's the 20th letter. So you add those together and you come up, what would be that? What did I say it was? 32 plus 20, right? 52. What the gematria would do then is take 5 plus 2, because you have 52, say 5 plus 2 is 7. So the reduced, you might say, gematria value of the word sephir is the number 7. And then you say, well, what's the number 7 mean? Hey, that's completeness. So they come up with these things. Now, a guy named E.W. Bullinger in the 1800s, late 1800s, 1880, 1890, he wrote a book about the number, the arithmetic in the scriptures. It's just an astounding work. This guy was a genius of geniuses. I mean, this guy was just amazing. He also wrote a book on the stars. Now, and also in the 1990s, a guy, I believe his name is William Banks, he came up with another book on the stars. I think one is called The Witness of the Stars, another one is the Gospel in the Stars, maybe. But what they found is that if you look at the stars a different way, still the same 12 constellations, but if you look at them in a different way, there's 4 books of 3. So the constellations work in these patterns of 3. Now, how did somebody determine that? Somebody had to look at the stars and say, what seems to be going on? But what did they use as their basis of determining the stars? They had to go back to what? The Greek deities that were named after the stars, the constellations? Well, see, to apply the deciphering of Paleo-Hebrew into this word Sefer, to look at just the dictionary value, you say a document or a book or a frontier or a border, or to count, or how do you count? 1, 2, 3. If you're going to make a border or a frontier, in the olden days, they would set up forts. They'd stick a fort here and a fort there and a fort there, and the forts might be a half a day journey apart or maybe a full day journey. The missions in California set the missions a day's journey apart. So you could stop at a mission along the way and be protected. The same kind of concept. But what you're doing is it's almost like putting up fence posts in your backyard. You put a post here, and then a post there, and a post here, then you string fence wire between them. You're sephering. You're connecting the dots. So we've used this word sephering by saying connecting the dots. You're counting, yes, but you're also establishing a frontier or a border. You're saying this is inside, this is outside. So the big white fence of the Mishkan is a border, a frontier. There's something in here that's different than what's out there. And then there's something different about what's inside the set-apart place than what's outside in the courtyard. It's a border, it's a frontier that's been established. But if you look at these letters and say, but it's also to tell or narrate, to tell a story. If you read there where in Genesis, I think it's Genesis 15, isn't it? Maybe, where Abraham was told to sephir the stars. And then it says, if you're able. Well, this word if is spelled aleph mem, but it also means on the condition of. So there's 2 ways to read this. Some might read this account in Genesis and say, Yahweh says to Abraham, he had promised him a son, and Abraham didn't have a son. And Abraham said, what good is you giving me all these blessings, that I have no one to inherit it. And he says, Abraham, step outside. Take a look at the sky. Count the stars if you're able. So shall your descendants be. And it says, and Abraham believed, and it was accounted or attributed unto him as righteousness. So Abraham steps outside and goes, wow, there's sure a lot of stars. I can't even begin to count them. So I'm not going to do what Yahweh said to do, which was count the stars, because of course it's impossible. Even now, recently, within the last couple of years, scientists looked into a place of outer space that had no stars, complete black, just a little place somewhere where they could see nothing. And then they turned their super-duper telescope on it, and they found that it had more stars than anywhere else. It's like, gosh, how do you count these things? You can't. What, was Abraham told to count the stars? Or was he told to sephir the stars, connect the dots, tell a story, draw a picture, and on the condition or with what you come up with, in consideration of Abraham, what you've come up with, so shall your descendants be. That's a whole different story. Suddenly, Abraham is entrusted with an incredible responsibility to take Yahweh's commandment and do something with it. And it says, and Abraham believed. Oh, wait a minute. What's that word believed? We've talked about this word before. It's aleph mem nun. Amen. So be it. It's the word translated faith, but it's more appropriately faithfulness. If you look here, again, in the Red Dictionary, under aleph mem nun, again, you have to know how to read through the letters to find this stuff, or else it won't do you much good. Page 35, you have to learn the alphabetic sequence. Aleph mem nun, to be firm, to be trustworthy, enduring, strong, eternal, trained, was educated, he trained himself, he believed, he trusted, he confirmed, was accredited, goes down faithfulness, truth, amen, so it be, truly, certainly, faith, confidence, trust, fidelity. It also is the word artist, master, workman, a craftsman, an artisan, a specialist. Aleph Mem Nun. You see, the problem is, if you look through these different words, on page 35, you'll see that the difference in all these things I was reading is the vowel points under the words. So anybody who knows Hebrew will tell you that I'm lying to you. Those are different words. The thing is, in Paleo-Hebrew, there's no vowel points. So what I'm trying to show you is that part of this methodology of what I'm doing is taking all these things into consideration when you try to figure out what does Aleph Mem Nun really mean. And then you just get a feeling. In other words, connect the dots with the various definitions. And what you end up with is that Yahweh was telling Abraham to get out there, study the stars, become a skilled craftsman with noticing what stars seem to be connected. Study, become a skilled artist. And when you figure out what these things mean and you tell a story about them, and it says, and Abraham believed and it was credited to him for righteousness. What does it mean to be credited? Something's attributed to. In the word righteousness, zadikah, it also can mean to manifest righteousness. Well, what's righteousness? Some might say that there's only one righteous, and that's the Mashiach, right? So if what Abraham does faithfully and truly, which doesn't mean inventing images of heathen deities, it means that he's going to take the information of truth that Yahweh has revealed to him and artfully create it into an imagery of connected dots which manifest the righteous one. And then Yahweh says, with what you come up with, I will take this into consideration as I bring forth the manifestation of righteousness through the history of your descendants. Suddenly the stars become a revelation of the history of humanity, mankind, Israel, the Mashiach that was revealed to Abraham that's sitting there cryptid, that needs to be decrypted. So these people, Bullinger, who actually was working off the studies of somebody named Rawlinson from earlier times, he wrote this book, and then this person, Banks, wrote this other book, which is similar but a little different. And what they're saying is that if you take as a predisposed given that the New Testament account of this guy that was born 2,000 years ago, that people call Jesus, whose account of his life is in the New Testament Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, if you take as a given, without arguing about it, that this is the Messiah, then you look back at these stars, you will see that they match what he was supposed to be, supposed to do, different character attributes about him. But if you take as a given that this guy who lived 2,000 years ago was a phony, a fake, a fraud, a derelict, someone that was contrived by Constantine or somebody else that was not a true character, then all of a sudden you're phony baloney business, and it's like, well, now you're just, you may as well talk about Casper the Ghost, I mean, it doesn't exist. He's a make-believe item, and you have nothing to go on. But, we haven't had in this class too many good things to say about Jesus. And the reason is because I personally believe, after doing some study, that the character of the Jesus guy that we've inherited doesn't agree with the Torah. Amen. Now, there's a very interesting word I came across just this weekend I was looking at. When Moshe was out tending sheep, one day he saw a very strange sight. It's like a bush that was on flames, but it wasn't being consumed. He thought, this is very odd. I better go check this out. And he goes over there, and a voice speaks out of the bush. The account's in Exodus 3, and he's talking about this, and he says, who are you? Who are you that I should go back to the leaders of Israel and tell them that you told me what's going on? And the description of the answer was, Eye, Asher, Eye. It's translated, I am that I am. Well, that sounds like something Popeye would say. What are we supposed to do with that? Oh, well, he's the guy who, he just is. Okay, you can have a pretty lofty regard of that, but what did he really say? You see, the Hebrew scriptures are translated, I shall be what I shall be. It's like, don't they know the difference in tense? Did he say I am, or did he say I shall be? Again, it's like, which one is the authorized version? King James said, I am that I am. But the King James Version was authorized by the Holy Spirit. What about the Jews? They don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, so they're what? They're lost? They don't know their own language? Don't the Jews know their own language? If the Jewish translation says, I shall be what I shall be, you could say, oh, come on, it doesn't really matter. And it's like, well, but it does matter. If they can't tell the difference between the words I am that I am, or I shall be what I shall be, how many other things are kind of off? That's a pretty easy one, you'd think. So, what are we left with? Do we choose who we rather believe? The authorized version by the Holy Spirit, speaking to King James through his writers that were told to make sure that whatever they translated better agree with the authorized doctrine that the king has determined is what he wants his subjects to believe in? Is that the authorized authority that we choose to regard? Or is it the Jews who say, well, I don't know what they say. I just see what they wrote. I can't account for what they said, but all I could do is, what does the words themselves say? Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey is the word ayah. And I thought, well, that's pretty close to Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Yeah, kind of the same pattern, right? Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey versus Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Now, these four letters we've talked about previous weeks. Aleph can be a prefix meaning I will or I am. Hey is a revelation. Yod is the hand that works, or the creator. And then the Hey is another creation. And a Vav is a man, or that which connects to another revelation. So if you look at Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, and we went through this a few weeks ago, Yod, the hand of the creator, the one who made this place, to put those stars in the sky, would reveal, that's Yod, the hand of the creator, would reveal Hey, himself, as Vav, the man who would, Hey, reveal himself. Well, that matches a pattern in the New Testament where Yeshua said, at least it was said of Yeshua, John the Baptist, St. John, the Apostle John, in the Gospel of John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Word, what word? Well, if the Yod, the Creator, reveals or expresses, Hey, he expresses a word, and that word becomes flesh as a man, Vav. Yeshua then expressed, he said, only what he heard his Father saying and did what he saw his Father doing. So when the disciples said, well, show us the Father and it'll be sufficient for us, he says, have you not been listening to a word I've said? If you've seen me, you've seen him. What does that mean? They can't see the Father. In fact, even Yahweh said to Moshe, nobody can see my face and live. But then he says, you've seen it. You see, it sounds like a puzzle. And it's like, what do these mean? I don't know what it means because we've got English, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. All I can account for is to say it's a scramble. It's all mixed up. And I don't know how to descramble Greek and Latin and English, but I can look back at these words and say, what do these letters say? It cuts through all the confusion. It cuts through all the doctrinal squabbling and bickering and babbling, and it just says, what do these letters say? And I'm saying these things on purpose. There's a verse here that we can hopefully get to later on the second half, which says exactly this. I believe it's in Zechariah. Well, anyway, we'll get to it later, hopefully. It's in Ezekiel 20, verses 35, I think, through 47 to the end of the chapter. And it's talking about Yahweh bringing his people into what's called, it's translated, the wilderness of the nations. It's like the wilderness of the nations. There's a different way to translate it. We'll get to that later. My point is, I believe it has to do with language. Bringing his people back to his language and cut through all the squabbling and the bickering. See, if you look at Aleph as a prefix means I will, and Hey means to reveal myself as Yod, the Creator, who Hey has revealed or manifested everything that he chose and determined to make. You see, there's another way to read the word eya, not just I am or I will be, but it's kind of like this. I have determined, that's Aleph, to express myself, that's Hey, in what I've made and established, that's the Yod, which expresses exactly what I determined to express. So as its own word, Aleph Hey, Yod Hey, he says, I made a plan, I determined what it'll be, and I made it to look exactly the way I planned. Aleph Hey, Yod Hey. Yod Hey, Vav Hey, once again, to go through that, you say, the creator of the heavens and the earth revealed himself. Well, how did he reveal himself? In the Torah. So you could say the Hey of the Yod is the Torah itself. And then Vav, well, that's the man or the bridge or connected to the second Hey, but Yeshua himself said, I only say the things my Father has said. You can't determine the difference between me and my Father, which is why we look identical, because nothing that I have said contradicts him or is variant from him or is off the side from him or alters anything he's done. And everything I've expressed, Vav Hey, is specifically what I've said. So you have this picture of the menorah. Like Yeshua, the Vav, like in modern Hebrew, the center is this Vav. It's called the Shemesh. We said that before. It's the center candle that lights the others. And then you've got these two Heys, as it were, these expressions on both sides, like these kenafim, these wings that hold the thing straight, like the arrow we talked about in the symbol last week. So here you have Yeshua, and he says, the Hey, the Torah of my Father, is Hey, exactly what I've expressed. And he says, I'm going to leave and send you the Ruach, the Comforter, the one who will lead you on the path of truth. He will lead you to remember everything I've said, and only what I've said, which is what I was told, which is what the Torah is, will he lead you on. You see, there's no distinction between the two Heys. If there's a variance, a difference, an alteration, it's not him. How can I say that so emphatically? Well, let's look back at what he said. Ayah, Asher, Ayah. Well, there's a strange word in there, this word Asher. Let's look that up in the dictionary. Aleph, Shin, Resh. It's translated that. I am that I am, or it's translated who. I am who I am, or I will be who I choose to be. But if you look at Aleph, Shin, Resh in the dictionary, it's the word page 59, and it means to walk straight. To walk straight. I am, walk straight, I am? Doesn't make sense. We need to sefer something. We need to sefer something here. It also means, go down the list, to be happy, pronounced happy, or call something blessed. It also means to strengthen or confirm, to authenticate happiness. It also means who, which, that which, in order that. Let's put all these things together. Let's sefer all these dots together in one package. Aleph Hey Yod Hey, I have chosen to manifest and be and reveal myself and then create everything to manifest that determination in order that to confirm, to authenticate very specifically the straight line connection between this point and the point that looks just like it over here. Eya, what I've determined to be, I will manifest myself as, the straight line connected to what I determined to be and I've manifested myself as. What I will be is exactly what I determined myself to be. Who I am is the one that I considered all things, and I considered that this is the very best, the very only, and this is going to be what it is, and therefore what you see is what I determined it should be. And it's a straight line of authentication, authenticity, confirmation, to confirm that this guy is the same as this guy. They look identical. Aleph Hey Yod Hey looks like Aleph Hey Yod Hey. The Hey looks like the Hey. Yeshua said it, Yahweh said it, and Ehyeh said it. The great I am. So, very interesting. We go to Deuteronomy chapter 13, and Yahweh says, I'm going to show you guys a little way to test the spirits. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams comes up, and what he says comes true, you think, oh, it must be of Yahweh. Or say he does miracles. In fact, even Yeshua said in the judgment day, this is the scariest verse in the Bible, on judgment day, he's going to separate, as it were, the sheep from the goats. He's going to separate the right hand to the left hand, as it were, the wheat from the tares, and he's going to say to some, come into the place prepared for you, my Father's house. I provide you entrance. And to others, he's going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. And they're going to weep and howl and shout, what? We know you. You're our Lord, Lord, Lord. They're going to cry, we've done miracles in your name. We've cast out demons in your name. We've healed the sick and raised the dead. And we've proclaimed your name to all the earth. What do you mean you don't know us? And he says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. In Greek, the word is anomio, and it means lawlessness. And of course, he wasn't talking about rabbinical law or Caesar's law or the American law. He was talking about his own law, the Torah. Depart from me, you who disregard my Torah. I never knew you. Whoever you thought you were serving has nothing to do with me. The reason why we're in this class looking at these words is because this is serious stuff. What's this menorah? This Samecx? He says, Yeshua said, I'm the vine and you're the branches. If you stay plugged into me, nothing is impossible. But if you don't do what I say, if you don't stay true to my word, you will be broken off like a dead branch that bears wasted, worthless fruit, infested with bugs. You'll be thrown into the fire. We talked about the book of Revelation, where the Apostle John again gets this vision. And he sees this one walking amidst some candlesticks. Well, the word would be menorah. Was there one or was there many? Were there different arms of one menorah? I don't know. There might have been 7 menorahs. There might have been one menorah with 7 arms. It almost doesn't matter. The point is, in John's vision, he saw one that's holding 7 stars in his hand. Stars, 7 stars, that's almost like a constellation. There's a grouping of stars in his hand. Why is he holding 7 stars in his hand? He says it's the mystery of the stars. And as we discussed, I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago, the word stars, if you look up in the dictionary, is kakav. Well, the letter kaf is a prefix. Kaf, kaf, vav, bet, I believe it is. The letter prefix is a kaf means like or as or similar to, and kov literally means fire extinguisher or fireman. Well, what's a fireman? Puts the fire out. Well, what's the mystery of the 7 stars, or what's the secret of the 7 fire extinguishers? If you read the rest of the beginning there of the first couple chapters of Revelation, he says to the 7 assemblies, says churches, but they didn't have churches then. They have, if anything, synagogue, but that comes from a Greek word, episunagage, and if they were anything, it was kahal or assemblies. 7 gatherings at different cities. And he says, here's the message. And he had something positive to say, something negative to say, and he says, if you guys don't do what I tell you to, I will extinguish your lamp. Well, that's the same as the word star. Could it be that there's a message in the stars to his assemblies? What about his assemblies? Well, here's the interesting thing. The letter Samecx, like I keep saying, is an engineered structure. The positioning of the 12 houses or constellations, you could say, well, did Yahweh put 12 up there? Maybe 13. There's some discussion about whether there's a 13th. Well, how many tribes of Israel is there? Well, there's 12 tribes, of course. No, there's maybe 13, maybe 14, actually. Why 13? Because Joseph had Ephraim and Manasseh, and Yaakov, on his deathbed, said, these 2 will be like my sons. So they're called 2 of the tribes of Israel, not just the tribe of Joseph. In fact, you can't even find the tribe of Joseph anywhere because he's been reinterpreted into Ephraim and Manasseh. And why I said maybe the 14th, this is the debatable study, but people have said the Ashkenazi of Eastern Europe were not necessarily of the inheritance of a particular tribe, but of a people group who chose to become Israel. Now that's the difference between Sephardic, who are in Spain, and the Ashkenazi, or Eastern Europe, which everybody has a right to do. Any Muslim, any Hindu, any Christian has the right, the privilege, the open door to come to Yahweh and become Israel if they want to. This is an assembly, this is a kahal of those who choose by their volitional interest of their heart to become Israel. And we're sitting here studying the words of Yahweh to know, what does that mean? So within the structure, the designed structure of Israel, we have this menorah which Yahweh designed. It's His design. We'll get into it later. It's in the book of Exodus. He says how to do the menorah. A little tidbit off to the tangential side here. If you look at the way he designed the arms, he said 3 bowls on each of the 3 arms and 4 bowls in the center. This menorah is different than any I've ever seen, other than they were at the conference last week up at the Love for Israel. There's 22 candle lights. There's 22 letters of the alphabet. You'll never see a menorah that way. They're always with 7 arms, 7 lamps. But there might have been, the way that I read this, like 1 shield behind this group of 3 bowls, and then 1 shield behind the group of 4 bowls. So there's 7 lamps, but technically 22 bowls. And if each bowl had a wick, you'd have 22 lights. Is it a symbol for the way the alphabet goes together? That's what I believe it is. The point is, he designed this center with these 3 on each side. He designed this. It's an engineered structure of his design. Interestingly enough, for you mathematics inclined people, if you take 22 and divide it by the 7, you'll end up with 3.14, which is the symbol for pi, which those who know about pi, it's like, I heard a guy talking about on the radio once. He said, if you look back at coordinates, longitude and latitude, and where old-time ancient days temples and monuments stood, anything that is on that configures to the letter pi, the number pi, 3.14, which is the association between the radius and a circumference of a circle, they did it on purpose. This was very specific. It doesn't happen by accident. And you could say, did he do that on purpose? 3.14, 22 divided by 7? Just something to think about. The point is, the menorah is his engineered structure. The fact that you can see 12 constellations in the sky, maybe 13, is like saying, well, there's 12 tribes of Israel. Yeah, but Joseph had 2, Ephraim and Manasseh, so that's kind of like 13. Abraham determined that and put the pictures in the sky according to those 12. That's an engineered structure. That's Samecx. For him to say, I have placed my tribes, I have placed my people, and I have arranged them all in a certain way according to principalities or jurisdictions. That's his design. He did it on purpose. To study the stars would then be not astrology unless you appropriate God-like deity significance to them to where they govern your life, because only Yahweh is our Elohim. But to study the stars as a message of Yahweh, that's a whole different matter. Perhaps it's Yahweh's revelation to us through this other method of speaking. Speaking through the stars, apparently, and if you go back and look at Bullinger's work or Banks' book, each one of the stars has a name, which even if you look at Chinese or Latin or Greek or English or Arabic, they're all the same meaning. All the stars in all the different languages have the same meaning, which means it came back, way back, maybe from before the time of the Tower of Babel. So the point is, this one book was saying the oldest known planetarium, planisphere, ceiling with the stars, the constellations as we know it, goes back to a place in Dendera, Egypt, about 2000 BC. Wouldn't you know it? That's when Abraham lived. And whether it's approximately 2000 BC. Abraham begat Isaac, begat Jacob, begat Joseph. Well, there's a little bit of time span there, but Joseph, remember, was the vizier, or the prime minister, as it were, of Egypt. Remember, Joseph had the vision about the sun and the moon and the stars bowing down to him, and he told it to his brothers, and they couldn't stand it, so they threw him in the pit, wanted to kill him, sent him to Egypt, where he rose to preeminence. I mean, all these stories, you look back and say, what does it got to do with Samecx? You see, an engineered structure is not just a piece of trellis work we'll get to it later, but like a ladder, that's an engineered structure. It's a prop. The Samecx is like a rose trellis. The Samecx in paleo, so here you have in purple on this pattern here, it almost looks like the mast of a square-rigged ship. It's the support structure that takes this load of the wind blowing against the sail. It looks like a trellis for a rose or some kind of climbing wisteria plant that gives it something to grow on. For Yahweh to design the 12 houses of Israel, 12 houses of the constellations, is his architectural, engineered design. So the question is, where are we? Where are we in the engineered design of the way that humanity would progress on the face of the earth? We talked about before, without going into the whole thing again, 2010 ends up being the end of the 2,730-year curse. I'd never heard of this curse. For 50 years in Christianity, I never heard of the curse. Is there anybody here that doesn't know what I'm talking about the curse? Is there? Huh? Okay, real quick. In Leviticus 26, Yahweh says, I know you guys, and I know that you're going to rebel and you're going to go wayward. I put before you the blessing and the curse. Moses said, I urge you, I compel you, choose the blessing. It's life. Choose the blessing. He said, but I know you guys. You're thick-headed, stiff-necked. You're going to choose the curse. I know you're going to choose the curse. And Yahweh says, that's okay. Tell you what, I got a deal for you. You're going to choose the curse. You're going to get cursed for a certain amount of time. But then I'm going to present to you the choice to come back to my covenant again. In which case, if you respond and you come back to the covenant, I'll give you the blessing. But if you don't, I'm going to multiply the curse 7 times. And the word 7, shavah, shin bet ayin, is the word for curse or oath or vow. It's to swear something 7 times, like swearing on a stack of Bibles. How many Bibles? How about 7 Bibles? The word 7 means a sworn vow. I will multiply the curse 7 times like your sins. You want to know what the curse is going to be? Look at this is what you guys have done to my stuff. This is what's going to happen to you. You go back and read in Leviticus 26, and there's a whole list of horrible, terrible, horrendous, heinous things that are going to happen. It's like, isn't that enough to startle the people into keeping his word? No, it wasn't enough. And he says, okay, I'll multiply it 7 times, and then I'll present to you the covenant again. And if you, your descendants, your people, you still refuse, I'm going to multiply it 7 more times again. He says that 4 times. 4 times. He says he'll multiply the curse 7 times. Now, does that mean 4 times 7? Is that he's going to multiply it 28 times? Or did he just say 4 times that he'd multiply it 7 times? Or did he say 4 different times he's going to come back to them and say, are you ready now? Are you ready? Do you want the blessing yet? And if these 4 times you say no, he says, okay, that's it. It's going to go for the full 7. The southern kingdom was taken into captivity by the southern kingdom of Babylon in about 550 BC. In Ezekiel chapter 4, Ezekiel was told to lay on his side naked outside the walls of Jerusalem. 40 days for the house of Yehuda, 390 days for the house of Ephraim, or Israel, the northern kingdom, a day for a year. But Jeremiah upped the number of the days of the curse to 70 for the house of Yehuda because for 490 years they didn't keep the land Sabbath. It was supposed to be 1 a year. 1 year out of every 7, the 7th year, you're supposed to not farm. Let the land lay fallow. Give the land its Sabbath. They refused. So 1/7 of 490, which was 70 years, they were in captivity. And Daniel did these calculations and said, hey, wait a minute, we've done the 70 years. Our time's up. We should be able to get out. So he prayed to Yahweh and said, hey, your word says, and Yahweh said, that's right. By golly, you figured it out. You severed the dots. You held me to my word. You guys get to go free. So with Ezra and Nehemiah under Cyrus, the king of Persia, they went back to Jerusalem. What happened to the northern 10 tribes? Have they ever come back? You got 2 branches of Yahweh's, well, it's not a menorah because it's like 12 houses. I'm pointing at saying, though, if you break one branch off, where's all the rest of the branches? If you break all but one branch, you see, what about Yahweh's engineered structure? The northern 10 tribes were taken into captivity by Assyria, the northern kingdom of Iraq, if you would. In 721 BC, after a 13-year siege, the kingdom fell when Samaria, the capital, was captured. I've heard some people say 721, 722. It depends on what calendar you're reckoning. The point is, 721. If you multiply 7 times in Leviticus 26 times the 390 of the curse that Ezekiel laid on his side for in 7 times 390 is 2,730. From 721 BC, 2,730 minus the year 0 is 2010 last year. Depending on when the beginning of the year starts, does it start in the month of Aviv? Does it start in January? The calendar's a little bit crazy. The point is, right about now, last year, this year, that's why we went to Israel last fall for Sukkot. It's the end of the curse. So we went up to Shiloh, the place of the altar of incense, where the tabernacle used to stand, on the last day of Sukkot, and we prayed to Yahweh and said, hey, you said we could come home. You said we could come back and join your engineered structure of the kingdom of Israel. And yet people were saying to Yeshua, is it now you're going to restore the kingdom? And he said, listen, you guys, it's not like, hey, look, it's over there. Let's run over there to where it is. Or, oh, he's going to show up over here. Let's go meet it. It's like, do what he said. That's the kingdom restored. We can now come back and do what he said. That's what this is about. So the question is, what did he say? And if we have somebody say, hey, look, he changed the rules. Look, he made it real easy. Is that Ayah, Asher, Eya? No, there's no Ashar. There's no straight line authentication connection. To authenticate what this looks like, it has to look just like this. The reason for studying this language is we're looking back at the engineered structure of what Yahweh designed. What did he say? Where did he place his words? We talked at the very end of the meeting last week that Nun Samecx is kind of like this thing that it inflates. The word zavot, as in Yahweh Elohim zavot, is that which inflates to the full. Each letter inflated to the full. It's kind of like in Proverbs, I believe it's 25:11, golden apple. It also means that which inflates with scent. And that's what swells up on a crafted silver platter is a word fitly spoken. Yeshua is the word fitly placed, staged. Each letter Yahweh has placed in each word according to this design of these 22 letters, each one placed in reference to the one before it and reference to the one after it. Samecx is the one that says there's a very specific structure. And to those who have chosen to come into the kingdom of Yahweh, that's the big white fence, Het, Tet, and Yod, be claimed by him. And like the Tet is a potter's wheel, and his working hand, the Yod, puts you on the potter's wheel when you come into the Het, the fence of his kingdom, because you've been qualified by the Vav Zion, Yeshua slain, the ashes of the red heifer. Outside, you've been decontaminated and cleansed so you can come in to be claimed by his, like the Tet is a branding iron, stamping you as his possession. He puts you on the potter's wheel and starts working you according to learning the instructions, Kaf Lamed, the Torah. Mem Nun, to birth, to incubate, to nurture, to bring forth the promises. It's going to be either the blessing or the curse. That's all outside, but what about this stuff inside, the set-apart place? That's for those who have determined to be the good stewards, the servants of Yah. That's for those who Yeshua said, when I come back, am I going to find faithfulness on the earth? Did he say faith like anybody that believes, or did he say faithfulness? Am I going to come back and find anybody doing what I asked you to do when I left? If we could say, oh yes, I believe. Is it about belief, or is it about doing? If you translate the word Aleph Mem Nun, amen, as, oh yes, he believed. Did Abraham just believe? If you look at the book of Hebrews, it uses this event with Abraham as the qualification or the example of our faith. It says, Abraham believed, and it was credited to him for righteousness, so that's all we got to do. Well, if it truly is a model of our faith, then as Abraham would have been faithful, you see, you're not going to study the stars and become a skilled artisan sleeping all night. You might sleep during the day when it's hot, but all night long, you're going to be up there and you're going to be. year after year, season after season, writing stuff down, figuring stuff out, remembering what Yahweh told you, and somehow appropriating the design of these constellations into a revelation of righteousness, hence the Mashiach, born through Abraham's descendants in order to redeem planet Earth. Abraham's got to figure all that stuff out and do it with Yahweh's approval, blessing, and wisdom imparted, or else it's going to be wrong and it's not going to work. If we have any of this today, it's because Abraham did a good job, and if he's then the father of our faith and the model of our faithfulness, he didn't just sit around sleeping and playing video games. This guy was busy. This guy was diligent. And we should be just as diligent, suffering the things that Yahweh said, so that the position that He has given each one of us. You could say, well, I'm not like one of those menorah branches. You got this big shot and that big shot and this church and this historical. It's like, I'll tell you, Yahweh has designed. If He has placed the stars and given them names, and they're just stars, even though they're incredible, beautiful galaxies, the heart of a human, that's His treasure. And He cares a lot more about your heart in placing you to a position of a principality as significant as any one of those arms of the menorah. You, each one of us, has the potential of being that person to Yahweh. The principalities is Him saying, those of you who have learned the instructions and have rendered my promises to be true, the blessing or the curse, I will now position you in the secret place, in the closed exclusive, in the elite core of my own. And I will place you in time and space with just the right attitude, with just the right skills and qualities that I myself will impart to you. See, Noon is also like this lightning bolt, imparting of His own stuff to equip you to be in the position to be the menorah, to Samecx, to be counted as a good, faithful servant, a steward of His words that you learned out here, so that now when He places you, picture this giant chessboard, and when Yahweh takes you and He moves you into this space, it's a strategic move that you may not know until later, but each one of us are His playing pieces in His game. We're on a break.